This might be one of the coolest KPI cards that you can currently make inside of Power BI. And the reason for that is because one, it looks very clean, but it also gives the end user a lot of flexibility. They can choose to change the amount of time the actual KPI is being shown for. They can choose to change the actual measure inside of the KPI, as well as using this slicer to change the number of days that the moving average calculation is based on. It also gives a lot of contextual information so that people can really just see all of the information that they need at a glance. And today we're going to make this. Credits to the actual KPI card design goes to Gustav Dudek. I really recommend you to follow him on LinkedIn if you haven't already, because he posts a phenomenal amount of inspirational content, such as this right here, which is what the entire design is based on. If you'd like to follow along this tutorial, you can also go to the GitHub page, which will be in the description, where you can download this KPI video starter report, which will be the exact report here that I'm going to use to build these cards so you can follow along. First, let me just talk about what data we're going to use. This is actually my personal data with a little bit of changes here and there, and it shows the date, the impressions, engagements, new followers, and total followers. Now, you might recognize this and what it is, and it's actually my LinkedIn statistics for how many impressions, engagements, and new followers I have on any given specific day. Now, these have been obscured a tiny bit, but in any case, a lot of the data here is basically my own, which I'm just posting out for people to be able to use if they'd like. If you'd like to get this data for yourself, it is possible to download your own LinkedIn data, but it's a little bit complex and I had to actually download this through my mobile application because I don't believe you can do this through the web portal. So this is what the dataset looks like, and it's extremely simple. Now, the additional things that I've done here is I have created a date table. So there is a date table which I created simply by using Bravo. Now I have another video about this which I'll link in the description, but Bravo is essentially an external tool which allows you to create date tables very very easily. So all I did was I opened up the external tool, I clicked on manage dates, I click on time intelligence. I usually like to turn off this time intelligence function because it'll add a whole bunch of different things to your report which you don't need. Right now, I've just made sure that the interval is the starting at the years that I want to. The data is between 2022 and 2024, so that's fine. Preview changes and you'll see that it'll make something, and if you apply changes, it'll simply create this date table for you. So that's already there, and all I've done is connect the date from the new date table into the date inside of the data table. Works just fine, and there's basically nothing more that I need to do for the date table. It's one of the fastest things that you can do when you're making a report like this. I've also created a couple of additional tables, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Now I have all of the measures that I'm going to be using in this Power BI file, so you won't necessarily need to actually write any DAX yourself. A lot of this is going to be about how to make the design and how to set this up. But we have these numbered because this is kind of the way that I'm going to go through them, and you'll actually be able to see that the first three items is very simple. How many new followers do I have? How many total engagements do I have? How many total impressions do I have at any given time? That's fine. So this is the three KPIs that we're going to be working with. And what I've got here is I have a maximum date as well as a minimum date. The maximum date is basically going to let me know what is the actual top date inside of my data. So you can actually see the data here. If I go to the data and filter by the actual date, sort ascending, then you can see that, sort descending. Then you can see that the top date, the maximum date is the 13th of August. That's completely fine. And then the minimum date would be, of course, the 15th of August in 2022. That's pretty cool. And the reason that I have this is because I'm going to use these values in order to start making calculations in just a moment. Now I've got all of these things here, and we can actually do something pretty easy, like attempting to get this chart in place by, let's go back to the Power BI file. We'll take new followers, throw that in with the date, and we've already got the line chart. Now we can actually do a little bit more because this is supposed to be a bar chart, first of all, and then the line is supposed to be Okay, so right now it looks like a line chart because it's just so much data, but they're actually columns. And we're going to throw some things into the mix to alter that in just a sec. Now let's keep going through the actual measures. We've got the amount of selected dates. Now, selected dates here, if you look at the KPI card, is actually using this really interesting way of showing either 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, this year, a full year, or all data. Now, in order to actually do this, what we need to do is, okay, let's go back to the Power BI reports. We need to first create a disconnected table and actually put those measures in. So right now we've got something here called date selection. The way that I've created this is I've literally just clicked on creating from the reporting view. I clicked on this button right here, which is create a new table by typing in content, and I manually typed this in. There's not that much in there, so I've just manually typed this in, and this is going to show exactly the options that I'd like to display, as well as an index so that these it's like values can be ordered by the index. The way that you actually do that is, of course, let's select a date selection. You click on date selection and you can click on this button right here, which is sort, and you can sort it by the index to make sure that it's always going to be in the correct order. Now, I'm going to put this inside of a slicer new. This is the actual slicer that we're going to use. And let's just make this a little bit cleaner. We'll do a lot of the filtering in just a moment, but if you go to the formatting pane and make sure that the rows shown is just 1 and the columns shown is, I believe this is 6. Yes. So 6 different options, then it's already pretty much a lot closer to what it should be. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. We'll remove the spacing between the buttons to 0. We're going to remove the title, and that's good enough for now. We're going to put this right here, and you can see that if I select a week, a month, 3 months, right now it doesn't do anything. That's okay. So we're going to go back to the DAX measures, click on the selected dates, and the selected dates is basically going to let me know which item is currently selected. So if I put in the selected dates here, you can see that 1 week is selected, 1 month is selected, 3 months is selected, etc. Great. Why do we need this? Because we're going to use this to calculate the selected minimum date. Selected minimum date that we're putting in here is going to be the cutoff date. So if you look at the KPI card and how it works, right now when I select 1 week, it's supposed to show 7 different items. So 1 week worth of data. Otherwise, it's going to show a month's worth of data, or 3 months worth of data, or all of the data this year. So in order to do that, I need to be able to filter this data by by this date, basically, starting from this date. The easiest way to do this is to have this function, which is going to be the minimum date, selected minimum date based around what your selected date value is. So if the selected date value is going to be 1 week, then you'll have the maximum date, which is the latest date possible, minus 7. Now, I've put +1 in here because if you didn't have this and you just started it at +1, it would actually show, instead of 7 items, it would show 8 items, because you have to take into account that you're not including, let's say, 8 days worth of values. You're only including 7. It's a little bit annoying, but it's the easiest way to make it work. And the minimum date, which is the smallest date possible, you want to make sure that when you're actually selecting all values, you want to have every single value shown, just like what it is right now. And you have to show -1 so that it's not taking the data from the first dates after. So it's a little bit annoying that you have to put these 2 values in here, but that's the way that it works. Right now, using a switch function, depending on what is currently being selected, we can choose to show the date, which is going to be the minimum date that you want to show, to be the maximum date -7. Doing this, which is a date minus a specific number, gives you a date which is that many days behind that number. If you use the function edate like this, then it gives you the specific date minus a specific number of months in the second argument. So right now this is supposed to be, the 13th of August. If you do edate max date -1, it will show the 13th of July. If you do 3M, then it's like 3 months in the past. This year, I just want to make sure that it's going to be the 1st of January of this year. And you can do that by creating an actual date value using the date function, where you put in the year of the maximum date. So it'll just take what is the year that your latest data is in, and then the first month and the first day in order to get the 1st of January of this year. eDates minus 12 will give you 1 year's worth of data, and then all, of course, you want the minimum date to be this. Great. So if I actually put, let me see, date selection into a table, and I also put in the minimum date, then you'll actually be able to see all of these values. This is a little bit small here. Yeah, so this is exactly what we want to have in order to show all of this different data. Fantastic. So if that's the case, then basically what it needs to happen is I need to filter this value by this data. And in order to do that, I can actually use this function here. So, oh, sorry, we need to go back one sec because now we are also going to create another table in order to be able to have a little bit of dynamic values inside of our measures. This right here is going to be the allow us to change the metric that we're showing from, it's like new followers to total engagements to total impressions. That's exactly the same as, it's like any of these other KPI cards. And we're going to do this with a switch table. Now, a switch table is a little bit different from a field parameter. A switch table means that you have to actually create a table. Here I've called it measure selection. And I've called it new followers, total engagement, total impressions, 1, 2, 3. It's made the same way. I've just entered data like this. The reason that I'm doing this in a table and then using a switch function to indicate, depending on what measure is selected, give me either this measure or that measure or that measure. The reason that we're doing this instead of creating a field parameter is that if you created a field parameter, you can't use that measure inside of other measures, which is one of the main things that we're going to try to do here. So we have the selected measure, and that selected measure is going to give us a specific value based around what item is being selected. So let's go to the measure selection, put in the measure name here, and we're going to make this a slicer. We're going to make this a drop down single select item. So right now, new followers is selected. Let's remove the slicer header now. And with the new followers selected, if we put, okay, let's get rid of some of these. With the new followers selected, what we're going to see is that in our data, selected measure is going to give us a specific value. That's the number of new followers. If we have total engagements, that's the number of engagements for this entire period, and so on. Cool. Now, if we have selected measure and we have a selected min date, then we can go to this measure. We have the selected measure, which is going to show us what a specific metric based around this slicer. And with this additional filter, keep filters dates between using the date, the minimum date and the maximum date. Basically what this does is it allows me to give a value which is between the maximum date and the selected minimum date. So if it's 1 week, it'll show me 1 week's worth of data. 1 month, it'll show me 1 month's worth of data, 3 months, etc. So here, instead of showing new followers, I'm going to take the selected date parameter and put it into the column y-axis. Now we can see for 1 month, it shows 1 month's worth of data. For 1 week, it shows 1 week's worth of data. For, it's like, and so on and so forth. That's really nice. And it allows me to get to a little bit close to the state where I've just got the columns. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to create this moving average as well as this contextual information. So let's start with that. Now, there's actually some more things that I want to show about the contextual information in, it's like the items numbered 3 and 4, but we're going to move ahead to the moving average first. The moving average is this line right here, which you can alter with this wonderful slicer. It's got 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, or 30 days. That seems pretty great, but as you might have guessed, that's also being done with another disconnected table. So that's the moving average. It only shows 3, 7, 14, and 30, which is completely fine. And we're going to throw this, let's see, moving average selection, days, into another slicer. You can actually do something pretty neat where if you change it to a slicer, select the total impressions, click on this formatting button, and then click on this visual. Oh, okay. Unfortunately, it doesn't change everything exactly as I'd like to. What I want to do is I want to make this a drop down and you can select a specific item here. Cool. It's a little bit smaller here for now. Okay, so if I have this, then I can first start figuring out this moving average value. So we have a moving average selection and it's only showing me which selected value, selected measure it is. So right now 3 is selected and you can see 3, you can see 30 if it's 30 is selected, etc. pretty normal stuff. This moving average selection is going to be used in this moving average calculation. How we're doing the moving average calculation is we're creating basically a small table, average X of dates in period. The dates in period is basically going to give me a small date table that's going to start from the current date. So whatever date exists, whichever date you're basically on, and using the last date function, you can go back a specific number of days. Now, it is probably possible to just put, it's like current date minus, this number of values, but I'm just using this function because I think it's really nice that the last date allows you to change from day to number of months to year or something, or, it's like whatever denomination you want to move backwards in time, you can actually do that with this function. So you can basically just put the last dates minus, it's like this specific value, and that will allow us to actually, to go back in time a specific period with this. If it's going to go back that many, it's like days, we can just say that we're going to average for those dates in this period. And this way we will basically have an moving average value for all of the data. Right now, if I put in the moving average into the line axis, it actually shows it for everything, no matter what. So we actually need to do the same thing that we did for the columns to limit the amount of data. So from the moving average, we need to add the date parameter, which is if the actual selected measure isn't blank. Well, if it's blank, return blank. If it's not blank, then add the, it's like dates between filters so that we're showing the data between the max dates and the minimum date. This way, if we put this into the x-axis, we basically have the moving average that is now dynamic and can change based on what is being selected, which I think is very nice, and it's a really good way to be able to show contextual data around, it's like a little bit of smoothing of how the variables are changing. That seems great. So once that's done, we're now going to move back and we're going to make this. First, we're going to try to identify how to find the contextual data. Right now, this value is showing total impressions in a week, 83.85, it's like 83,000 impressions within 1 week of data. It's actually a little bit below what the previous week was. So the previous week seems to have, it's like had 21,000 more, and we're down 20% this week compared to last week. And then, you can like change the date parameter in order to see, it's like what these data sets are. And there's a couple different steps to this, which is first, this needs to show the actual measure that's being selected. It needs to show the total value. And then it needs to show this, it's like reference label, which shows, how well we're doing versus the past period. And then you can see there's a little text here that says the previous month, previous week, or, it's like however much that might be. So if we're going to look at total impressions, then we can see it's 83,000 this week, and previous week is 105,000. If we actually want to show this information, the first thing that we need to do is find what is the previous week value. And to do that, we're actually going to need to do something. We're going to go back into the DAX values, and we're going to actually see that we have a selected min date, but we also have a selected min date past period. And what this measure is basically going to do is it's going to show us the actual dates, one period in the past from the last period. So if you can kind of think of it like right now we have 1 week's worth of data, then we need to see what is another week behind that. So what's 2 weeks from, it's like the maximum dates. That's basically what the minimum selected period is going to do. And it's basically just following this the same formula as the minimum date, but it just juggles around the dates, one direction or another to make sure that we have the proper amount of dates. And then we're just going to say, just give me what is the minimum date or the maximum date, and we'll just take it from there. So it's going another week behind the selected minimum date, for example, when you have 1 week selected. And this is really important because now we can do, we have this selected measure date parameter here. And, so you can see that there's this value here. But now we have the selected parameter past period, which is going to basically say, give me the data between the minimum date that you've selected and then one timepiece behind that. So we've got the data for this week, and then the data for 1 week behind this week. Great. Now that we have that, we can actually do some really cool things, like we can have what is the date parameter delta? This value is just going to be what is this current week subtracted by the past week, and they put that here. Yeah, it's minus 22. And then we can do this, which is divide the delta by the past period to get the percent. So this hasn't been changed to percent, which it doesn't need to be, but for just showing you. Now, this is starting to look really familiar. All of these values are the same values that you see right here, 83.85, minus 21.5, 20.4, it's like 105.4. Great. It says 22 right now because it's not showing, and you say, yeah, it's not showing the decimal points, but this is exactly the same amount of data that we want. And now we're going to throw it into a actual card that we can see everything the way that we want to. This is where it starts getting a little bit more tricky, and where we're going to start using a lot of the formatting pane in order to get things right. Now, first things first, let's take the selected date parameter. Now, this is the measure that we're going to use, and we want to use it in the card new. So this allows us to, have this out there. Let's take all of these things and make it a little smaller, because we don't need this to be big right now. We don't need this. We need a little bit more real estate for us to work with. So this is where we're going to be doing great. So we've got this date parameter, and first thing that we're going to do is we're going to turn on the title. That's because this title is what is going to denote which measure is currently being selected. Total impressions, total engagements, whatever you like. And then the title itself, if we open it up, see that there's this conditional formatting value. So if we select this conditional formatting value, we can go and see, I think it's in data, we've got the selected measure. Now this won't actually work because it's going to return the measure, but I think in measure selection, selected measure text. So this is one that I'll show you in just a moment. Selected measure text is just what's the selected value from this actual slicer. So just going to put this in right there. We'll make this size 20. We'll make this a Segway UI, maybe semi-bold. Yeah, that's fine. And that's going to be the, it's like title of the KPI card. So you can see that it changes when, different things are selected. Fantastic. Then we're going to go to call out values. The values is actually mostly okay. We'll make this Segway UI semi-bold as well. We'll make the value size like 20 for now, and we'll make it bold. Won't make it bold. We'll make font bold. It's really up to you how you want to change it. But for now, I'm going to just leave it like this. We're going to remove the label because that's not relevant to us right now. And then what we're going to do is go to the reference labels. And when you click the reference labels, you'll see that the series is selected for this value. That's fine. And we are going to put in, for now, just let's put in the parameter delta. This is pretty cool. And, you can actually see that what we're going to do is remove a whole bunch of things, like what's the title, and then you've got the value here, and then you can actually add more things to the reference label. And if we wanted to, we could just put in the delta. So it's like minus 21.5, minus 20.44, and we could call it a. But if you did this, then it doesn't, it's like, and of course the title you can change and go into select label, change that field name into custom, change it to something else here. But that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we want to have it all highlighted so that it's conditionally formatted to show green if it's going up or red when it's going down. And in order to do that, we need to make a couple of changes. I'm going to go through a couple more things here, which is like what is the reference label color? Now, if the delta, so if the current, it's like week value subtracted by the past week value, so this specific value, right? If this value is positive or negative, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a reference color, which is a green or a red for the font and the background based around if this is positive or negative. This will allow us to get this positive or negative, it's like green and reds directly to be used inside of the conditional formatting places. Also, we need to create a little something here. Okay, so this is the long one. This is the longest, it's like DAX measure in this whole shtick. But what's going on here is that we are going to basically say that there is a current value and a past year value or last year value. its current value is going to be what is the date parameter, and the last year value, last period value, let's call it that, is going to be the past period measure here. Growth is going to be, we can change this to parameter, it's like delta, but it really doesn't matter. So I've just left this here for now. Divide the current subtracted by the past year, past period divided by past period. Then we're going to take the date parameter, which is the main value that we're going to show, and we're going to the number of digits. So what it's going to do, it's just going to remove any decimals by converting it into an integer, and then it's going to convert it into from an integer, it's going to convert it into a string. After it's being converted into a string, it's going to take the length of the string in order to get the number of digits inside of a value. So if the date parameter was, for example, 1000, it would identify this is 1000 in a string. This is 4 different, it's like characters, and that's how you identify it, whether it's 1000, a billion, a million, thousand, million, billion, or trillion. And this is a little something that I have in a different video, which I'll link as well, about dynamic format strings. Right now, this isn't in a format string. That's okay, because I'm using this just to, to generate a piece of text. But what it does is, from the number of digits, it'll be able to identify what is the display unit that it should have. And it'll also do something interesting with the format string. The format strings work in a really interesting way, where if you have some commas like this inside of the it's like format string, it will remove that number of it's like values from from your actual values, so that you can have it's like 20 T instead of 20,000 T or something like that. So it would show the correct values. It's like, for example, when you have 25,000, you want this to be 25K, not 25,000K, to denote the correct value. And the way that you do that using format strings is, if you had this and you put in, for example, 2 commas in the middle here, that would take it's like the sum of the values out in order for you to get that correct value. So that's why this is here. It's going to repeat the number of commas for how many commas we need for whether it's a trillion, billion, million, or 1,000. And it's going to bring that all together so that you'll have commas and the suffix. Right now it's a 0.0 because it's going to have 1 decimal point. And then if the growth is not 0, then what we're going to do is format the current minus last year, so the delta, into the specific format. And then the growth is going to show as either a % increase or a % decrease, with a pipe to separate the values, and showing, it's like nothing else. That allows us to get this wonderful little piece of text, shows this. And, it's like, and this will work based on, it's like whether you're going a month up, a week up, or whatever you'd actually like to show. This is really nice. And the main reason that we're doing this is because if you have reference labels, so you can see reference labels have 2 things, a value and a detail. In the value section, you don't have the ability to change background color. In the detail, you do. Because of this, you can't get this glowing effect on just the regular value for reference labels. So if you wanted to have this glowing effect, you need to put the data in this detail function. So I'm going to do that right now, where I'm going to take the reference label, add it here. Now you can see that's there. But now we've got way too much stuff. So what do? We turn off the value, we turn off the title. Great. And then what we do is we're going to go into the font color, click on the conditional formatting, go to field value in the format style, go to data, and then we've got this is the font color that we're selecting. And sorry, is that the font color? Yes, that's the correct font color. Now we're going to do the same for the background. So go to field value, we're going to select the background color. Okay. And now you've got a font color and a background color. Great. So these reference label settings is basically the first step to getting, it's like the information that you want. But now I want this to be here on the right of the label instead of at the bottom. What we need to do is go to reference labels again, select all, go to options. So this doesn't show unless all is selected. If you have this here, you see that the options is grayed out. That's because here, when you have a series selected, you're changing things for the specific series. But if you select all, we'll change it for everything. So now we're going to go select right of callout. That's fine. Gonna make sure we turn off title and value. This will turn it off for everything. You only have the one, so it doesn't matter so much. The divider is on, because if we turn it off, then it's like it gets a little funky just because there's just so much space between. But if we have the divider on, then we can actually modify this a little bit, just fine. I'm going to turn the background off, and the divider we're actually going to make 100% transparent so that this just looks, kind of more or less okay. This is a little bit, it's like off, and I do see a lot of people struggling with this, but in order to change the spacing, if you go to layout, you can make it into columns, for example, and you can select this to make it vertically aligned, and this is a pretty good way to do it. So you can even do rows, and you can see that it changes a tiny bit. I think it's a little bit more aligned to the top, and I think if you do columns, it's like a slightly better spaced. Most of the time this will work, it's like just fine for most people. You can see that this is basically all that we need, except for the previous it's like month value here. So if we have all of this, and now, okay, so let's do a little bit of cleaning up as well. Go to the cards, make sure that the background is turned off, make sure that the border is turned off as well. Can you see that? You can see that I'm turning all of these things off. And then if you go to the very top, size and style, there's also another background here. So if we've turned all of these things off, then it will just, act like this. Totally fine. Nothing more that you'll actually see that what I've done is I've just moved this over the top here so that it's selectable, and this is still visible. We might still change the fonts and stuff. Okay, so this is actually pretty close to what we're showing you here. Only we need the previous month values and the moving average series labels, but that's going into formatting in just a second. So let's get the previous month value. So what I've done here is I have a past period subtitle. It's using the same logic as the reference label, this one right here. And instead of going, it's like comparing two things, we're just taking what was the past period, and we're going to format this so that it's showing the correct display units. And then based around what's being selected in the date selection, if it's a week, it's going to say the previous week was this value. If it's a month, the previous month is going to be this value, etc. And this is a really nice way in order to get this kind of value. So previous week was 105,000, and previous month was this much. 3 months ago was this much, etc. Fantastic. So how do we get this to show properly here? So the way we do that is we're going to go here and we're going to actually play a little trick. The title actually has conditional formatting. So what we're going to do is the title of this line and bar charts is going to be our value. So we're going to scroll down into the field value and select our past period subtitle. And we're going to make the text color just slightly gray and make sure that it's Segue UI light. And also maybe we can make it that's fine for now. But basically this essentially allows us to have previous week show as part of this. You can see that it's a little bit difficult to align everything, and we will sort all of that out in just a moment. But in the title we can actually go and add a divider as well, and now you can actually see that this is really close to what it's like I'm going for. Okay, so I think that's basically it in terms of it's like all of the different elements. And now let's go into the formatting part. We're gonna fix everything up so that it's nice, the colors are it's like correct and everything. So first what we're gonna do is we're gonna format this. This is probably the biggest one. We're going into the selection pane here because we need to make sure that this slicer is above this total impressions, and we need to make sure that this item is above total impressions as well. I think that's really the only things that you need to it's like do. You can select everything, go into properties and make sure that the header icons are turned off. That's a pretty good let's select here. We'll turn off the legend because we don't need that. We're going to go and turn off the x-axis titles as well as the y-axis titles. One of the things that you want to do is the x-axis should start from 0, and the secondary x-axis, so because you have two different x-axes, should also start from 0. Now, the best thing to do is to do something like this, where we have a y-axis max. So taking the max value of the it's like date of the measure that you've selected across the dates that you've selected is a really good thing to do, because that way you can keep the axis the same between the secondary and the primary it's like axes. it really helps in order to, to make sure that you're seeing the correct, because if these two were slightly different, then the moving average that you're looking at is probably not correct. Now we can go to the secondary axis and turn off values. Now it says turned off. This is a bug that I've seen. Select it on, select it off again so that it gets fantastic. Now we're going to go to the columns here. The color here, we're going to change it. Let's see what. So this item, this color here, we're going to just change it into a hex code. It's going to be this BCC7D5. And then the line color, and then we're going to go to the columns. We're going to the lines. We're going to change the color of this to be more colors 5C80AD. That looks great. And we'll also make it 2 pixels instead of 3. A little bit cleaner. That's completely. We're also going to make sure that we don't have any grid lines. Sometimes you can, leave them on. That's your, that's how you'd like to do them. I think it clutters a little bit because we already have these axes. It's fine to have it without. Now, this is pretty neat. We're going to make sure that the background is turned off, and we're going to do that for everything. Select everything and background's off. And the reason that I'm doing that is actually I'm going to insert just a regular shape, regular rounded rectangle. I'm going to place this at the back, and that's going to be our actual card shape. And this is fine. A lot of people like to do this inside of the actual background or the wallpaper, which, by all means, go for it if you would like to do it this way. I think this is nice because you can just have everything grouped together. Let's make this into this shape. I'm going to go into the shape, style, rounded corners. Let's make it 10%. Let's make the fill white. That's fine. We can have a border if you want. It doesn't matter so much. Just put in one of these colors, and you can put in a little bit of a shadow if you want, and there you go. Pretty clean looking. It's a KPI card. Pretty good to be able to group everything together, which I will probably do in just a sec. But for now, let's keep going. So we have this here, previous week values. Great. This here. Now, you might find that this is a little bit too big, and you might want to change some things around. That's totally okay. It's at your own discretion. What I've actually done is I'm going to go through okay, so this is 99%. It's like what I've done here. You can actually go back and change a couple things if you want to make sure that it's a little bit more aligned. You can see that here, the call out values, for example, seems to have, it's like bump outside. That can sometimes happen. A good way to, it's like fix this is that inside of the selected measured text, you can add a space. Now, you can't add necessarily just a regular space, but you can add a blank character space where you can just, copy and paste a blank character, put this into here, and then you can see that it actually, it's like can make that space a little bit bigger. I don't like to mess with this so much anyway. I mean, I think this looks completely fine as is. You might find that this is a little bit too big, and the way that you would want to modify that is if you go out to the callout values with the slicer selected. Let's make it 9, for example. If we make it 9, we can actually see that it doesn't seem to go like to the middle because of padding. Now we can make it a little bit small like this. Let's go into, I believe it's size and style. I think it's the padding here. Yeah, just in the size and style. If we make the padding 0, you can see that it goes up a little bit. Padding 0, right? A little bit smaller. It still doesn't go up. That's okay. We're gonna go to the callout values. Sorry, I don't think it's the callout values. Maybe it's the buttons. Yeah, here, padding in the buttons. So we can make it custom. We can make the padding here 0. And then you can see that you can make it a lot smaller if you so choose to, it's like do this so that it's like takes as minimal amount of space as possible. You can absolutely, this is about as small as it can. You might also find that, it's like now there's too much space in between everything, which is completely fine. I think just do it as you think it fits the best. Okay, what else is there? This here, my original, it's like version, Gustav's original version, basically just has a lighter color selected on it, and you can just make the values a little bit smaller if you like. That's such a big deal, but it's recommended that you put the 2 slicers to have the same like sizes, because the size value will change the actual box height as well, so it's good for these to match. Okay, so I think the last thing that you want to do is you want to group everything together. Select everything, right click, and if you group everything together, you can see that, for one, you can move everything together, and for another, it really helps, it's like make maintenance a little bit easier, what you want to see. Okay, so this is it. this is the KPI card that I wanted to show you guys how to make today. I hope you learned something new. If you think this is really interesting, stay tuned. I'm going to show in my next couple of videos how to make these change based around which specific row level security you have, as well as I'm trying to figure out how to use calculation groups so that you don't have to build this every single time. So maybe you can just use a calculation group to get this to work. Thanks for watching. I hope you. So as always, I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching and take care.